on ZTN Prime. Please, those of you who are watching on ZTN Prime and through all the other channels, Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion website, as well as I'm sure possibly Ministry of Information, please keep your thoughts and views and comments coming through. Because, of course, this is not our conference. It's not our conference here in Victoria Falls. It's also your conference wherever you are around Zimbabwe. And you saw some of the presentations around the rainfall patterns, the drought patterns. I'm sure if you're watching or you have interest in farming in those areas, I'm sure you'd like to make comments for us so that we can try and answer some of those during the course of the next couple of days. Now, without further ado, I'll ask Linda just to introduce our next speaker, and we can move on with our program.
All right, and just a quick announcement. I will kindly request that our delegates fill in the registers as you come in and those that are circulating. So please do ensure you fill in the registers. Thank you very much. So we've had two presentations before lunch, which steered a number of some debate. And of interest to me was that most of the recommendations that were made are things that the government of Zimbabwe is already implementing. There was a recommendation to move from rain-fed agriculture to smart irrigation, and government is working on establishing rural business units with about 10,000 earmarked for this year alone. And one of the thrust of that is to then ensure that the communities benefit from the dams that are built in those areas. Talk of legislation, talk of the government or whole of government approach that was also made as a recommendation earlier on. We have had the President Dr. Edi Mnangagwa, driving that whole of government approach. So the what for me is already in motion, but maybe the questions around how are we doing it and how do we fine tune? So thank you very much to the speakers that gave us those earlier presentations. And allow me now to invite for session 3 of our conference today on climate proofing agricultural production and growth. And the topic is food security implications of climate change in Zimbabwe, building a resilient and sustainable cereal production. And for this presentation, I am going to ask from the University of Zimbabwe's economics student, Mr. Munyaradzi Chizomba, to come forward. And as Andy has already said, we will put our hands together and give him the confidence he needs as he comes to make that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Remember, keep clapping, yes, remember, yeah, keep clapping. Now, while we wait, while Munyaradzi is coming up, I'd like to call upon the panel to come up. I'd like to call upon Reneth Mano. Please, Reneth, if you could come up, and Jacqueline Mutambara. Please give them a round of applause, and the chair will be Honorable Chidua. Honorable, if you'd like to come up, please come up, sir. Right, thank you. Please, remember protocol, guys, protocol, yeah? At least that's one word we all remember, protocol. Thank you. Right. Munyaradzi, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
One, two.
Yep. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Allow me to override on the protocols that have been observed. My name is Munyaradzi Chizomba, a final year economics student at the University of Zimbabwe. So today I'm going to present on a topic of critical importance to Zimbabwe's future growth, which is food security implications of climate change in Zimbabwe, building a resilient and sustainable cereal crop production through irrigation investments. I recognize that among us today are professors, doctors, econometricians, statisticians, mathematicians, who may wish to explore algebra, statistical equations, and econometric models I use in my research. But I want to inform you that you are not going to see any formula in my presentation. For those who want to see the formulas, They are there in my paper. Okay, so for simplicity and a clear systematic approach, I structured the presentation in 6 sectors, which is background and problem statement, objective of study, research methodology and data, main findings, policy recommendation, and conclusion. So let's go to the background and problem statement. We all know that agriculture is vital in Zimbabwe's economy, with most of the population depend on rain-fed. But since we are experiencing a downtrend in rainfall, this results in a reduction in production, grain production, which lead to food insecurity and cause hunger at household level. A good example is the 2023-2024 season. We experienced a El Nino-induced drought, and we all know the results. People are crying outside there. So the current adaptation strategy and mitigation measures are not adequate, including the irrigation. Why I'm saying this? Because in Zimbabwe we have more than 10,600 dams, but last season we found that 217 hectares were under irrigation out of a potential of 2 million hectares. So let's go to the objectives of the study. The first one is to assess agricultural impact. At this, we estimated cereal crop production losses under business as usual scenario. The second objective is to evaluate adaptation strategy by stimulate the impact of scaling up irrigation on mitigating predicted crop losses. The third one is to inform policy. This is to provide evidence-based recommendations for enhancing national development plans to better address climate change risks. Research methodology and data. We used time series analysis to utilize secondary data to forecast climate variables and cereal production trends from 2024 to 2030. So the data on climate indicators and cereal crop production spans from 1960 to 2023. Temperature data available from 1900 provide a comprehensive base for assessing historical climate trends. So we used statistical analytic tools by employing regression analysis to validate trends and relationships. We also used time series analysis models such as autoregressive integrated moving average and autoregressive distributed lag model to validate the consistent and internal validity of the climate forecast. We also used those models to capture the relationship between cereal crop production and the climate variables. Let's jump to the main findings. There's evidence of climate change in Zimbabwe, as demonstrated by a decline in rainfall and increasing in temperature. As we see, the trend analysis of rainfall, annual rainfall there's a downward trending of the annual rainfall, and on figure 1B, annual temperature, there's an increasing trend. So, figure 2A shows the relationship between the crop production and the rainfall. As we see, there's a positive association between cereal production and rainfall. Since we are experiencing a downfall in a rainfall trend in Zimbabwe, this results in a production of cereal crops to decline, as shown on figure 2B. Maize, which is maize, has experienced a decline trend from 1961 to 2021, as shown by figure 3A. But if we take data from 2009 to 2023, we find that there's an upturn which is the trend changed, is now upward, possibly due to government. I think it's possibly due to government strategic programs, where they try to boost the grain production incentives. Sorghum and millet are drought-tolerant crops, which may be used to address the impact of climate change and food security, but their production are currently very low. As we see by the trend line of the millet is downward sloping, which means the production is declining, whereas the trend line for sorghum is slightly increasing. So increasing drought frequency in Zimbabwe and declining precipitation is supported by district statistics. So if we look at the charts, we find that Chikomba and Chipinge districts saw a mean precipitation drop of 26% and 27% from 2011 to 2017 compared to the earlier years. So let's go to the policy implications. Zimbabwe needs to expand irrigation infrastructure. If we increase the irrigation infrastructure to target at least 115,360 hectares, utilizing the existing and the new dams to enhance water availability for agriculture. So figure 6 estimated benefits of scaling up irrigation in maize production. So the red line show the estimated benefits of, the red line estimated of the business as usual, meaning we are holding all variable constant. So we projected that if we hold all the variable constant, from 2024 to 2030, we will get 1.4 million metric tons. But if we invest in expanding irrigation infrastructure, we will see a continuous increase in output of maize production. Number 2, there's need to foster for the adaptation of water efficient technology by implementing advanced irrigation systems such as drip and sprinkler technology to optimize water use and minimize wastage. Number 3, we need to intensify the program of drought. We need to intensify the program of promoting the cultivation of drought-resistant crops to encourage the cultivation of millet and sorghum by giving incentives to people. Number 4, there's need to bolster investment in research and development in agricultural sector. This can be done by funding the researches for drought-resistant crops and efficient farming methods, collaborating with institutions like International Crop Research Institute for the same arid tropics. Number 5, there's need to foster multi-sectorial collaboration by building participation between government, business, and non-governmental organizations. Then the last one is to strengthen the institutional framework by enhance the capacity of institutions like Zimbabwe National Water Authority to oversee and implement water management strategies. So in conclusion, Zimbabwe's agriculture faces major threats from climate change, jeopardizing food security and economic stability. So to build resilience, the study highlights that there's need for expanding irrigation, adoption of water-efficient technology, and increased hectarage under drought-resistant crop. Addressing these issues should enhance food stability, stabilize the agricultural economy, and contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of zero hunger. Thank you very much.
You need to give him a big round of applause. Can you imagine a university student who can come up here and talk to such a distinguished house? Thank you, please, well done. And also what it emphasizes, of course, is the youth, how the youth are involved in our farming, how we need to also be aware about the youth and gender. It's very critical. We need to make sure that, as the president says, and is our mantra, leave no one and no person behind. Now then, our next, here I am. I've just come. I was so excited by the young speaker. I even left my program. Now then, let's move on to our next speaker. What I did like. No. He wants to go. I'm not letting him go. No. He has to learn the hard way. Yeah. And you're sitting next to the MP. Did you? Okay, all right. Right. So anyway, we'll move on quickly. But I have a quick what's the word? Task to do for the honourable. Good. Right then. So let's now move on to our next speaker. Now, talking on modeling trends of climate vulnerability impacts on sorghum production in semi-arid Mudzi district of Zimbabwe. What I like about our speakers is that we're looking at areas that maybe people wouldn't think, Mudzi, Chimanimani, and so forth, Chirezi, areas that are really bearing the brunt of climate change in the environment. So I really like the topics that we have picked for the Zedcon 2024 conference. I'd like to welcome Ms. Wadzanai Mvudura from Marondera State University of Agric Science and Technology. Thank you. Member protocol. No, keep going.
Thank you very much.
Yep, it should be on. Hello. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is a popular statement that was said by Barack Obama that was actually saying that we are the first generation that are going to feel the impact of climate change. And honestly, we're also going to be the last generation that is going to do something about it. So it led me to think, what can I do as an individual in terms of climate change adaptation? So it got to a point that I went to Mudzi in April 2024. So when I went to Mudzi, I found the rivers were already dry. And I saw people carrying buckets of water, walking long distances. So I got really worried with that. So I further went on to ask them, how much did it rain like the previous season? Then they just said maybe twice or thrice. So if we had that amount of water, what is going to happen to our sorghum production? It's going to be limited. So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to go to our topic that is modeling climate variability in semi-arid regions of Mudzi district. This research was done by myself, a lecturer who specializes in water systems and global change, and together with Dr. Tony Tauro, who also looks at soil science, and together with Professor Mpangwa, who is an agrometeorologist. So there's a lot that we can talk about climate change. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Okay. So my presentation outline, I'm going to look at the introduction, the research objectives, the methodology, the results, and the discussion, and I'll go and look at the conclusion and recommendations. So according to the NDS-1, which spans between 2021 and 2025, we have food security as one of our main pillars. There is a condition that we need to decrease food insecurity between 59% to around 10%. So we are in a drive of decreasing this food insecurity. Then I'll go on further to look at the Sustainable Development Goals that actually talks about zero hunger. So we are actually in trouble in terms of trying to secure our future in terms of food. This statement of climate change is real and the worst is yet to come has been talked a lot in this conference. I'll furthermore emphasize on it. So we are seeing a lot of cyclones that are happening. We are seeing a lot of floods that are happening. Recently, China has a typhoon that actually caused havoc. So if you don't take this statement seriously, I really don't know what is wrong with you as a person. So there is now need for us to look at climate variability. Why is it important in agriculture? Let's look at the semi-arid regions. The semi-arid regions are those regions that are normally overlooked. When we talk about Zimbabwean climate, we normally talk in overall, but we normally tend to overlook these semi-arid regions, which are also very vulnerable. Mozi district is already facing high temperatures, is already facing low rainfall. So what is going to happen when climate change hits? It's going to be worse. Then let me take you a trip down in memory lane in terms of sorghum production. You know, sorghum is a traditional crop, an indigenous crop of Zimbabwe. So what happened? There was this thing called food colonization. So food colonization, I would try to call maize the big brother. The big brother came in, overtook our traditional maize because the traditional maize had more labor hours and people did not like the taste of traditional maize. So what happened now, it was overtaken by maize. But right now, I applaud what the Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development is now doing. It's now saying, let's go back to the basics. We have the traditional crops, which are climate resilient. But our question now is, how resilient are they? Are they also being affected by these climate vagaries? So we go on to look at the importance of modeling. Modeling is very important in planning. We need to plan. We need to have decision making. So modeling is very, very important because we go into the future, look at various scenarios, what is going to happen, and it will aid us in decision making. So that map actually shows the areas that actually grow sorghum in Zimbabwe. So these areas, I feel that a lot can be improved. We really need to upscale sorghum. We really, really need to upgrade this sorghum production. We normally call it the orphan crop, but today I feel that we are going to change the name of sorghum. So let's go to the problem statement. So there is an issue that sustainable intensification is high on the national agenda of Zimbabwe, but the issues of sorghum are still underrated than maize. Maize is the talk of the century. Why can't we talk about sorghum more, considering the changes that are happening in terms of climate? In addition, there is lack of information that is there regarding the effects, the real effects of climate change on our valuable sorghum crop. So the objectives of this study was to evaluate the trends, the rainfall patterns in relation to sorghum production and the requirements, and also to assess the impacts of climate scenarios on sorghum production. This was just the area that we're talking about, a very, very small area in the northeastern part of Zimbabwe, very hot. The temperatures are almost like Victoria Falls. It's very hot, I tell you. But, well, we need it. Okay, so we used our methodology was mainly based on looking at the rainfall and temperature data, whereby we derived information from KNMI, which is a climate explorer that actually can make us have information on rainfall. We did bias correction, and we also did sensitivity analysis for us to get the correct results. So The results were mainly from 1960 to 2023, which was the historic, and 2025 and beyond, which are the predictions under CMIP6. So we actually found a snapshot of the yield under the crop and livestock assessment from 2017 up until 2022, which we really liked as well. So let's see what the results indicate. So the results indicated that there is a declining trend of sorghum production, right? And also there is a negative correlation between temperature and sorghum, which is about minus 0.4. And we also have a very, very negative correlation between rainfall and sorghum. Let's go and look at the historic and the projected climate change in the Mashonaland East and Mudzi district. So this was a bit of exciting because the World Bank did some study under the Climate Change Knowledge Portal, whereby they were actually looking at different scenarios. So we actually said, okay, let's run with RCP 8.5 and see what comes out of it. And we saw that there's going to be a declining trend of rainfall. So you must bear in mind one thing. We have the issue that sorghum, for us to receive the 2.5 to 4.5 tons per hectare, which is a very, very good crop. What we really need is rainfall between 450 to 600 millimeters per annum. So what is going to happen? In future, we're seeing some figures that are falling below the threshold. So we are in trouble in future in terms of sorghum. Okay. So let's look at the historic maximum temperatures of Mashonaland East and Mudzi district. So we're going to see an increase in temperature that is going to happen as well, which is very disastrous for us. Let us go further and look at the discussion. We noted that there's going to be a sorghum yield decline. So what does this mean? It's caused by the impact of temperature. Temperature actually might delay the growth of sorghum, actually leading to a decline in yield. Rainfall, every plant needs water. So whenever there is no water, what does it mean? It's going to cause maybe permanent wilting point. We are not going to receive what we really want in terms of the yield. Let me go to the much needed recommendation, the conclusion. We have noted that the rainfall is going to decline and the temperatures is going to increase. So what can we really say? We have Fumvuza. Fumvuza is a very good initiative, if I tell you. I also feel, in addition, we need now to engage with seed companies that have to do with the production of sorghum. We now need varieties that are more drought tolerant. We now need varieties that have more genetic vigor so that they can be able to withstand climate variability. I'll go on to look at the adoption of Fumvuza. You know, adoption of Fumvuza is on the principle of diffusion of innovation, the DOI, whereby innovation is coming bit by bit to the farmers. So what is happening? We now need everyone to be part of Fumvuza. Even the slow adopters, we also need them in the board. So there is need for the upgrade in terms of Fumvuza adoption. Then I've noticed something about Fumvuza as well. I've noticed that farmers have now got what we call a dependency syndrome. They are given the 0.4 hectares under the government, and they just plant the 0.4 hectares without thinking of what happens after that. So we now need farmers to be able to have the right finance for us to upscale what we call Fumvuza, because Fumvuza is a good initiative under climate change. So we now need farmers to be given the finance that they need. Then we also have weather insurance that has been said previously. It's very, very important in smallholder farming systems. When you're talking about weather insurance, then we now need to create a robust climate information services. We have Mr. Majoe Moven, who actually presented a very good presentation. Now we need climate information services to be on high priority in terms of policy. The policymakers, climate information services is sort of like a decision-making tool for farmers. Before a farmer buys fertilizer, the farmer needs to have climate information services. So it needs to be now on high priority when you're talking about policy. Then these climate information services can actually be integrated as well. It can be integrated by IKS. IKS is Indigenous Knowledge Systems. How can that be done? I have learned of a system in West Africa which is called the PIXA approach, which is the Participatory Integrated on Climate Services on Agriculture, whereby farmers, besides of being given information by the Meteorological Service Department, they actually are able to participate in climate information services, which is actually beneficial. I also feel that there is need to support research. I feel that as researchers, we are working in silos with policymakers. We need to work together. We have a lot of information that we have, but if we keep our information without the support of the policymakers, we are going nowhere. I have seen a lot of students that write dissertations, their final year dissertations. They put policymakers, every one of them, but I wonder who reads. Policymakers, we need to work with you. We are willing to hit the ground running only if we work together. Then there's also an issue of irrigation development. There is need for us to have precision irrigation, the introduction of drip irrigation. You must bear in mind that Muzi has got one main prominent irrigation scheme, which is Kudzwe irrigation scheme. What is happening in the Muzi irrigation scheme? They are normally doing horticulture. Horticulture, they are not really relying on the sorghum. We feel that they need to upscale in terms of irrigation. There's also something that I need before I'm chased away off the stage. There is an issue of regreening. We can do something about rainfall in terms of Fumvuza, but temperature, we're in trouble. So there is need for us to regreen. I have heard of something that was done in Ethiopia, whereby there was compulsory tree planting. We can actually adopt it here, whereby a city that has been regreened, normally the temperatures are actually regulated. So we are not yet done in terms of research. Our next stage, we now need to formulate trials. This sorghum production we now need to look at the impact of climate variability on the phenology. What part of the sorghum crop is actually affected by climate variability? We now also need to measure into what we call metagenomics, which is how the temperature is affecting our soil ecology. So there is much that we can do as researchers. We need your support, policymakers. Please make life easier for us by supporting us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Wadzanai Mvundura, for that presentation. And I'm sure the call that you've made for policymakers and researchers to work together, your being here is testament of that commitment, especially from Treasury. And I would like to commend them for the balance as well we've had in the presentations. And I'm sure the Zimbabwe Gender Commission is mostly happy to see that balance of men and women making presentations, indeed walking the talk of leaving no one and no place behind. And we were talking earlier on with Professor Chakravarti that it's good to also have a female MC alongside Andy Hodges to eliminate that monotony as we leave no one and no place behind. So thank you very much, Madam, for that presentation. Allow me now to invite from the Zimbabwe Economics Society Council, the past president, Mishek Ugaro, to give us a presentation on climate-proofing agricultural production and growth. And as he comes forward, just a reminder to our presenters that they must stick within the 15-minute allocated time. As tall as Andy is, you don't want him to be raising the 5 minutes left paper. It can be intimidating, I know.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. May I write on the protocol that has been announced before, and to thank the organizers of the conference for the invitation. I'm going to, where's my slides? Right. I'm going to be talking on climate-proofing agriculture production and growth. But before I go in there, I just wanted to make a few overriding statements. I've noticed that even us researchers are working in silos, because my research, from the way I've seen the other reports from colleagues, are actually complementary. And we were picking precisely mostly the same issues, except maybe what I will do now is to maybe vary the focus. You'll find that precipitation map is the same, drought map is the same. Precipitation is the rainfall, is the same. But what I'm going to focus on now is the policy side, I think, such that I'm going to skip a lot of the slides, but they're basically almost the same. So if we were not working in silos, we would be knowing each other and sharing this information and bringing it here. But at the end also, even the government seems to be working in silos, because you find that policy coordination may not be across the ministries. And in my last two slides, which is where I'm going to focus on, I'm going to talk a bit more on this. So just to run down it, next slide. This one, oh, it's me running it down. Yeah, the background, the makeup of my presentation is the same with everyone. So I won't go through it. But the problem statement is that the climate change is the biggest threat that we face as humanity. And the increasing frequency of disasters from climate change for Zimbabwe in particular, which is floods and droughts, is requiring policy interventions. So it requires a reaction. So what are those reactions? I'll skip all these. Maybe the objectives. I wanted to demonstrate the realities of the effects of climate change. I think it has been done by others. The case study stories of other countries, I'll speak about it a bit more at the end, because I think my colleagues didn't look at it, especially when it comes to ecosystem reclamations. The story of Israel, the story of Egypt, which are basically deserts, but which are producing enough food for their countries. Then to initiate and identify focus areas for further studies. I think we are all agreed that perhaps this is really perhaps an initial stage. We actually need to synthesize and coordinate all the information we are bringing here, so that then we have one conclusive forward-looking position. So I just wanted to show this slide as well. Outside what others have shown, the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions, which I think the first presenter talked a lot about it, the way they are going up compared to arable land availability in the world. This is a global position. In my write-up, I actually have the actual for Zimbabwe, but it's exactly the same scenario, which is a source for concern. Again, if you look at productivity versus our population growth, and here in productivity, my productivity is not just looking at per hectare, because it has to look at all the factors. So how much rain have we had, for example, last year? Out of it, how much did we produce? How much land do we have? out of it, how much did we produce? So when I was querying this and trying to dig down, I found that one of the issues, we probably are not very deep in our data availability. So it requires further inquiry to really disaggregate it down to that level. To say, so if we received 250 millimeters of rain, how did we produce? What was our productivity? If we had 3,000 hectares of arable land available, what was the productivity? And going forward, what should we do to improve that? So this is where I'm going to spend a bit of time. I want to come here. What do we need to do as a country? We really have to now begin to plan in terms of our warning systems in order to get us ready, so that we know ahead of time what's going to come and in which particular areas. As I stand here, probably the Minister of Agriculture should be knowing when rainfall is going to come in that 4 weeks that it comes, and where in particular, and then be ready in that particular area. With what crop and with which livestock, if it is livestock. I will also talk about livestock, by the way. Ecosystem restoration. I was pleased to discover that Linda, to whom I'm a fan of her program, Linda, on Monday, and I discovered she comes from my area. So we had a chat over lunch. We come from an area of the Save River, and it is silted. It's not what it was even when I was a toddler anymore. That's just one. And then if you look at Hunyani River, which then goes into, it ends up in the Kariba. And the way the Hunyani is silted with this stream bank cultivation and all other, and construction of buildings. And then Kariba not having enough water. Upstream here, where the rain, the water comes from, the catchment areas, we've destroyed it. So as a government and as partners, we really need to look this. And in my paper, I talk of Egypt and I talk of Israel, so that we can learn from them what Egypt does on the Nile. And they export fruit more than Zimbabwe. So we need to learn from there. Then infrastructure, it has been talked about, I think the damming and everything else. And then water supply security, and I want to talk of long-term planning. If the data that we as researchers have come up with, which is still very disaggregated, as I have admitted here, what my colleagues presented and what I'm presenting, talk to each other, but ourselves, we didn't really unite and share this so that we can concretize and synthesize this, so that it can provide the basis for long-term planning, so that we know in the next 40 years, numbers show us that our population will be so much, our food requirement for food security will be so much, and the land available for production of food will be so much. So what should be the plan? How should we invest? Which then talks to the financing of the policies. Earlier on I spoke about maybe some apparent miscoordination, with due respect, between the ministries. I will give an example. For example, Fumvudza is financed by the Ministry of, funds are provided by the Ministry of Finance, but I do not know if the Ministry of Finance knows what has been the output of Fumvudza. I don't know if the Ministry of Finance have followed up. My colleague George, do you know what has been the outcome of Fumvudza from what you have disbursed to your colleagues in agriculture? You do? Okay, that's great. So this is where I'm coming from. I think we need this level of coordination and monitoring and evaluation of these policies. Even here at Zedcon, and I was talking with a colleague over lunch, are we even monitoring ourselves and evaluating and seeing what we concluded last year here? Has it happened? What have we achieved out of it? So that we don't then just talk. So I think that long-term planning is critical. And when we come here, we want to make sure that we come up with resolutions. So I think already spoken a lot about this. What I was saying is contained in this summary slide. So to conclude, I've noticed that there are three distinct discernible trends for Zimbabwe, reflecting the post-colonial policies. And even post-colonial, there are two, my graphs actually showed two different trends of the two republics. They are quite clear. So it tells us that policy actually drives productivity. So this is where we need to harness that and say, how can we enhance it? I spoke of the financing policy, and my worry being the declining crop yield, which was shown as well by previous speakers. So in that, I think that's long and short. That's it. I tried to summarize by not boring people by going through the slides that also have similar kind of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mishek Ugawa, of course, a good mate of mine. Please grab a seat, Mishek. We've known each other for many years and interacted on economic policies and so forth. Right, so as Linda said, we will be obviously keeping and sticking our presenters to their time. Before I do that, I'd like to give a very big thanks to our sponsors and partners, UNDP, POTRAS, NCC, that's National Competitiveness Commission, CICADA, and NASA. And of course, our host, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development, and Investment Promotion. Now then, our next speaker, again with a time limit of 15 minutes. And I know that could be stretched, but because of where he comes from, because there's so much that his ministry, who is representing today, can talk to, but unfortunately, I only have 15 minutes that I can give him. I'd like to now call upon, and please help me in welcoming, to speak on the Ministry of Lands, obviously Ministry of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development. I'd like to welcome the Chief Director, Business Development of Markets and Trade, Mr. Clemens Bwenje. Mr. Bwenje, please, a big round of applause. Protocol, remember. Mr. Bwenje, thank you. That was great. Thank you so much. Mr. Bwenje, welcome. Welcome, sir. There you go. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Facilitator, for the opportunity to speak to this gathering. Let me ride on protocol that has already been established and get straight into my my presentation. So I request that my presentation. Yeah, maybe before, as they are putting up my presentation, I can just make a few comments about government working in silos, or I think it's a thing of the past, colleagues. Government we are now working together because there are platforms that have been put in place for coordination to take place. I can give an example of my minister. He meets with the energy minister, he meets with the Minister of Finance, he meets with the Minister of Environment, and they discuss on these issues. Colleagues, are you putting up my presentation? So there are platforms that are being used so that there is policy coordination amongst ministry departments and parastatals. And if there is any coordination that might, any non-coordination that might seem, it's probably a reflection of where there is no consensus amongst ministries. So I thought I could say that. And my presentation really would seem like a synthesis of what has been happening here, and more of a practical approach or application of what you've been saying, just to demonstrate that we know what you are doing as researchers. So if you think we are working in silos, it's you who is working in silos. Because we already know what you are doing and we are applying it. But of course, there remain a lot to be done, which we can do to improve. I don't know what has happened to my presentation. Okay, because I ran out of things to talk about it. So, okay, I can keep talking. Let me see if I can do that. So, in my presentation, I'll just try to emphasize the importance of agriculture, the challenges that it's facing, singling out climate change, making a case for climate proofing from the point of its negative impact on production and productivity, as well as growth and food security, but also from a point of the benefits that can come out of climate proofing. So I'll try to demonstrate that. So agriculture, really, we are mandated with feeding the people. And our mantra is food security everywhere, every day. We want food security. We contribute to poverty reduction. We contribute to employment creation, improvement of standards of living of people, and then also generation of foreign currency, as well as growth. One of my slides here tries to demonstrate how important agriculture is as a sector, but also in other sectors, manufacturing and services. Now, we have taken figures from 2023, and we found out that agriculture contributed 12% to GDP. Now, when you trace the value chain, you find that manufacturing contributed 11.2%, but out of that, I have to use this one. So that's the presentation. I'll conclude with some recommendations, which are more or less of what you guys have been saying. So those are the important things that we are mandated with, and this is what I was talking about. Now, when you look at manufacturing, we are it contributes 11, but of that, 7.8% is coming from agriculture. Look at accommodation and services, contributed to 0.24%, and 0.15 is coming from agriculture. Now, when you look at the national level, considering all the three sectors, agriculture actually contributed 20% of the 23.4. Quite very important agriculture is. So we are saying climate proofing is central to leveraging agriculture, to leveraging national development, for agriculture to leverage, national development. And these are the challenges that colleagues you have taken, and I have singled out climate change there to say, look, you can invest in all this, but climate change can always become a limiting factor. That's the principle of diminishing marginal returns to investment. You invest in everything else here, but if you fail to invest adequately in climate, it becomes limiting, and you will not achieve. And this is demonstrated in my slides that are following. Here I'm still trying to, from the negative impact of climate change, I'm still trying to demonstrate why should we do climate proof? And look, this is not my data. I got it from a report. I'm sure it must be a World Bank report where they are talking about the impact of disaster on agriculture. And look at wildfire, billions of dollars between that period. 1 billion, biological disasters, 9.5, earthquakes, floods and droughts. Look at floods and droughts. And these temperature, it changes like that as well. So climate change is really a reality like what you were saying. And these are the negative impact that it's causing. And as developing countries, this is how it has affected us. Now, those were the negative impacts, but let's look at the positive prospects of climate proofing. This 22-23 data about maize production. We found out that maize and the sorghum mills, they were actually higher under when we compare conventional and maize. So this was the comparison. So the conventional is the what do you call that? Orange, red, call it whatever. That's the conventional. So yields are better under Pfumvudza. Now, this is the year that just ended, a drought year. Now, if you look at 2023-24 for maize, the results are consistently above conventional for Pfumvudza. But if you go to maize, they are a bit of, they are non-conclusive results. But what we are getting out of here is that there is need to climate proof beyond conservation agriculture, beyond Pfumvudza. And the issues of insurance, they also come in. Now, here I've used the growth patterns for agriculture GDP just to show how Pfumvudza and climate proofing can be, right? So we introduced Pfumvudza there and it drove positive. But when you go to 2024, it's negative 15%, and it's projected to be 12% in 2025. So even when we have done that, we still are very vulnerable to climate change. So our climate proofing is not enough still. We need to go further. That's maize. You can see how it has been impacted by the drought, right? See, even conservation agriculture needs water. It fell by 72%. Sorghum fell by 54%, but it fell, by a smaller percentage than maize, which then emphasizes the drought resilience. Wheat, irrigated crop, the trend is almost like that, government support. Livestock, I think there is a positive trend there, which I want to suspect that it's government programs that are effective. Just allow me to say that. Milk production has sustained a growth, from 2020 to 2023. You can see it's increasingly above. And I think this has been investment through the Dairy Revitalization Fund, which was a private sector initiative. And now that emphasizes the role of private sector in agriculture development. Right? Goes on a positive trend indicating their resilience. I want to come here and speak more. This is what the ministry is doing. What are the initiatives that the ministry is doing to climate proof? The climate proofing interventions, they are contextualized within the context of the agriculture, food systems, and rural transformation strategy, right? And it has got some anchor plans, which I have listed there: agriculture recovery plan, livestock recovery and growth plan, horticulture recovery and growth plan, the accelerated irrigation rehabilitation and development plan, and then the rural development 8.0. Now, these plans are delivering climate proofing outputs, which I've tried to summarize in this here. Dams, irrigation, boreholes, and these climate proofing instruments are leveraging largely on public, private, and development partners' resources. I've put public there because I think at the present, public is the largest, in terms of the funding. So they are then leveraging these public resources to climate-proof agriculture, which we expect to drive the Vision 2030. 5 minutes. Wonderful. I can then run to the recommendations. This is just what is informing. This is the agricultural food systems transformation. It's expected to transform those people to, surplus-oriented farmers, all the settlement to from surplus to commercial, and A2s to business people. That's what we want to do when we eventually have transformed. And these are the programs: irrigation development. Those are the targets. We are focusing on new irrigation development, rehabilitation, solarization, modernization to more efficient systems. And the major challenge is investment. So we have there an investment alliance initiative, which is bringing together the banks, government, and farmers, and those that supply irrigation equipment to share risk. And this is what I was trying to explain here. This is the Irrigation Alliance trying to accelerate investment. And what is important about this is the risk sharing, the mechanism. And then we also have got the Vision 2030 Incubator and Accelerator, still trying to get investment into mechanizing for conservation agriculture, and the presidential input scheme. This is the Pumbuza that we have been talking about. But these are the questions that we are raising. How do you deal with the Pumbuza under drought? Because we've seen that it's vulnerable, Pumbuza. We have seen that when there's waterlogging, we have challenges. We need researchers to help us there. What is the scope of biodiversity and insurance issues? Biodiversity, agroecology. How can we integrate these into Pumbuza? I think those are the issues that we need researchers to help us. The cotton scheme, the major challenge has been the pricing system. You use the cost plus. It's more expensive. It gives a non-viable price to processors. You do an export parity, because this is an export crop. You do an export parity pricing. You get a price that is not viable for farmers. So what do we do? As government, I see a situation where we can't run away from a subsidy. But the question is, who do you give the subsidy? The farmer, the processor? Those are the issues that we need to be able to answer. The horticulture recovery plan, the presidential input scheme, those are the village businesses, in school business units, youth. Again, these are based on a bowl, the water system, trying to ensure that we climate-proof every village. The presidential Tigris, and this is responsible for the increase in the herd, the livestock growth plan recovery, still the community fisheries, the poultry, goats. And we are saying our maize has failed because it is susceptible to, but we have wheat. So we can have a wheat-based food security a recovery plan. And these were the plans. But the question is, look, we are going to have a surplus. Our pricing system, is that going to allow us to export? That we have to examine and see how we are going to deal with such things. These are some of the initiatives that are being done in livestock. That's pastures, and that's a meal that is being produced by our Department of Research, troughs for livestock, science, all those, they are very important. Right. I wanted the proposals. I have two. This is one slide and another. Finish. This is my proposal, which is one of the panel's proposal. Let's have a national climate resilient fund, which is funded by government, international finance, by private sector, and the donor support and grants. This should finance a national climate-proofing investment program. And why do we want that program at national level? Because it will benefit from a whole of government approach. a whole of stakeholder approach and also a whole of community approach, which we have adopted, so that there is that coordination that my colleague was talking about, so that we intensify that coordination. So the idea is to invest in climate-proofed infrastructure, to invest in agriculture, water management, and also ecosystem conservation, which were basically the recommendations that my colleague. And the objective is to enhance Zimbabwe's resilience to climate through support to resilience infrastructure there, irrigation, capacitating institutions responsible for infrastructure development, institutions responsible for research, institutions responsible for extension, support mechanization, support national climate research monitoring network, and dissemination of climate information. I want to come to this one. Support the tailoring of fiscal and non-fiscal incentives for promoting private sector investment. As government, we are big time there. But we are missing the private sector. The private sector, what sort of incentives can we put? This is the proposal. We think we can come in and say areas around selected water bodies in the various provinces. We identify these, we designate them as special economic zones so that they can benefit from those incentives. And it's not enough just to designate special economic zone. It needs to be developed. And then the investor comes in and, starts to make money. He cannot start from developing the area. So, and then the issue of government guarantees, national project status to irrigation projects of agreed status, of agreed scale. Then this issue of zero rating versus VAT exempt, we recommend zero rating. And we are aware that there are revenue losses. But our view is that that revenue loss is actually a public investment, which will be more than compensated by private investment inflows and savings that we are going to have especially with grain import bills. Now, there is also going to be increased agricultural production as a result of those incentives, and that will promote rural industrialization and development. Colleagues, I thank you. This is what I prepared for you.
Please, a big round of applause. Mr. Bwenje, thank you, sir. When I tell you Mr. Bwenje could have spoken to us for 2 days because his ministry is so involved. No, Mr. Bwenje, can you go grab a seat at the end there? Oh, is that? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, leave that. Thank you. He could have spoken to us because his ministry is obviously involved. Please, another round of applause, Mr. Bwenje. Thank you. In climate proofing, making sure that we water harvest, how can we access water? And I think that particular presentation, which we will share with you, which is a lot more detailed, looking at different categories in the agricultural sector. You'll be able to review that at your leisure. And of course, he is here for the Q&A session, which will happen straight after the panel discussion, which will be chaired, of course, by Honorable Chidua. Now then, our next speaker, before we get to the panel discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to take what I always call an executive decision, and I'm going to move tea, if you don't mind. I feel like we just ate lunch. So I'm not sure if we like tea, but we will be moving tea. Unfortunately, I am the boss right now, so what can I say? Right, so anyway, let's now move on. I'd like to now call upon our next speaker, who's going to talk on the role of insurance regulation in enhancing climate risk resilience, a very important topic. He's from IPEC, which of course is the Insurance and Pensions Commission. He's the director there. Please give me a big round of applause for Cuthbert Munjoma. Cuthbert? Right, come on, you know the story, protocol. That's why people walk slowly when they're getting clapped. Have you noticed? Cuthbert, welcome. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. As I wait for the presentation to be uploaded, I'm going to share practical initiatives that we are putting in place as the insurance and pensions industry in trying to mitigate climate risk. Unlike my colleagues who were presenting research papers, ours is not a research paper. These are the pragmatic issues that we are implementing. Research is important. Certainly we need evidence-based initiatives. And we do research again as we implement these initiatives. So, is that... So in terms of outline, I'm going to share practical experience being implemented by the industry through our support as well as collaboration with development partners. I'm also going to share current sustainability financing initiatives and as well as what we envisage going forward. So in terms of scene setting there, I was going to share one interesting statistic relating to agricultural insurance coverage, which is at 3% of total business being written by general insurance in Zimbabwe. This is interesting if you try to compare it with motor. We are insuring motor vehicles more than we insure agriculture as a country. And being an agro-driven economy, and given what has been shared since morning, I think it's a key reflection point. Should we really need to make policy interventions going forward in as far as climate resilience is concerned? Previous presenters have shared predictions regarding the future weather patterns, the issue of elevated temperatures, droughts, floods, the need to manage post-harvest losses. All that would then speak to the need to ensure we put in place risk transfer solutions, especially for agriculture. I would want to share the importance of sovereign risk insurance, that is at a national level. We are an advisor to government as IPEC, and one aspect that we've been emphasizing is the issue of sovereign risk insurance. So through the Africa Risk Capacity, it's important to note that for the 2023-2024 agri season, the government insured agriculture to the tune of about 5.5 million, and claims amounting to about 32 million have been paid. So I think the key takeaway there is that through sovereign insurance, we can actually do a lot in as far as mitigating the impact of climate change is concerned. So we would also want to appreciate there's been collaboration with partners such as KFW, FDB, Swiss development agents, among others. So it's testimony of the importance of public-private partnerships in ensuring climate-resilient agriculture. As IPEC, noting the low pension, the low coverage in insurance, particularly agriculture, which is at 3%, we have deliberately embarked on a project to enhance agricultural index insurance. This is through partnership with a number of organizations, among them being IFC, the ICZ, which is the Insurance Industry Apex Association for the short term, as well as the government of Zimbabwe. We came up with a policy advisory paper which drew experiences from various countries that have implemented index insurance in Africa and beyond. So we are now at the stage of coming up with the regulations to implement weather index insurance. We acknowledge that this is an emerging aspect in Zimbabwe. There's been some products which were there, but in terms of awareness, there hasn't been much awareness, and even the regulatory regime itself, it was more skewed towards conventional insurance. So the issue of agri-index insurance will have prominence in our regulatory regime going forward. Regarding index insurance, again, there's been a lot of pilot projects involving the private sector. That is our licensees, the likes of Old Mutual, AFC, of late, involving Fumvudza. There's been an acknowledgement that, yes, Fumvudza has helped a lot in terms of climate-proofing agriculture, but as raised by other speakers, We need to go beyond Pfumvudza because it has its own limitation. And there's been some pilot projects that took place in Rushinga, Mwenezi, involving smallholder farmers. That is about over 30,000 farmers in Rushinga. The same happened in Mwenezi, over 6,000 farmers, and people have been paid. So I think it then demystify the aspect that, insurers don't want to pay. We believe with the collaboration, with information sharing, with awareness raising, agriculture can actually be insured and we can mitigate risk. There is also an initiative which is at pilot stage, which we embarked on in collaboration with the industry as well as government. We call it a farmer's basket. This project was implemented in Goromonzi. For convenience, if we zone most of the districts, ordinarily Goromonzi would not be in a possibly a drought-prone area, but because it's a pilot, we then settled for Goromonzi. Collaboration took place during the season 2023 to 2024, and about 4,000 farmers were involved in that project. So payouts are actually expected soon, and the ceremony is being arranged. And the key message again is that it's possible. These are initiatives at a micro level involving smallholder farmers, and going forward, focus should then be on upscaling agricultural insurance. Allow me to move. What I shared are initiatives by the short-term insurance industry. But the industry itself is big. It is life, pensions, as well as short-term. But generally, the industry has been playing a role in terms of climate financing, largely through investments, which is asset allocation, through what we call prescribed assets. These are projects of a developmental trust. The industry has been investing in renewable energy of late. A number of projects are being implemented. Some have been completed, some are at implementation stage, and others are actually in the pipeline. A number of projects have been completed, and to date, I think over the last 5 years, close to 60 million USD has been invested in renewable energy in 6 projects, ZATDC being the main off-taker. And of late, we've seen mining houses and those exporting companies also making arrangements with independent power producers for the purpose of securing power. Tied to that is the issue of environmental impact assessments. It's one of the key requirements that we insist on as we assess projects for funding by the insurance and pensions industry through prescribed assets. The objective being to ensure and to create an environmentally friendly, sustainable energy. So through investments, the sector is contributing to the attainment of SDG 7, that is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable modern energy for all. And the scope to unleash the potential of the sector in terms of investment in renewable energy. My next speaking point relates to investments in infrastructure. As you know, this sector generally mobilizes long-term capital for financial intermediation. The sector traditionally has been playing a critical role in terms of infrastructure development. What we are noting from the developers is emphasis on the need for green buildings, and a lot of initiatives are actually underway, including the development of social infrastructure such as the student accommodation, hospitals and clinics, among others. Allow me to move again to investments in biological assets. In response to the operating environment and as part of innovation, the sector is now investing in biological assets, and as the regulator, we've allowed it. We've actually increased the exposure to alternative investments from about 10% to about 15%. Largely, this is cattle, macadamia nuts, pecanut trees, among others. We actually have an insurance company which has significantly invested in this, and a head of cattle of about 3,500 is owned. We have a number of examples that speak to this initiative. I would move to the issue of sustainability financing itself. Having interacted with our peers in the region and internationally, the issue of sustainability financing is getting prominence. As we introspected in Zimbabwe, this is not an entirely new thing because the sector has always been investing in projects that would speak to climate resilience. However, what's key then is to become more intentional and more deliberate. Other regulators have put in place guidelines, ESG guidelines, taxonomies to guide investments into different sectors of the economy. And as IPEC, we assist with this. On our strategic plan, we intend to issue a green taxonomy going forward. However, what's key is policy guidance in terms of that taxonomy. We certainly appreciate the role of government, particularly the Ministry of Environment, and all stakeholders that are involved in climate financing. We've called as financial sector regulators, including the Reserve Bank, SEC, and DPC, that will be part of the national structures that are especially on climate financing, so that we provide the necessary guidance to our sector. So in terms of parting remarks, I would want to emphasize the need for us to unleash the potential of the insurance industry in creating resilience of the agricultural sector and the economy at large. We recommend that government consider subsidizing insurance premiums for smallholder farmers. Even cooperating partners can also help us in that regard. Then we reiterate the need to be co-opted into the national structures of climate financing as supervisors. This is central for us to be able to guide the sectors that we supervise. I submit, thank you.
Oh, no, you can do better than that. Please, a big round of applause. Cuthbert Njoma, thank you. Cuthbert, do you want to take a seat there? Thank you. Linda, please come up. You know, I'm passionate about insurance, very passionate. And just to give you a few numbers to understand about the lack of uptake of insurance, we'll get to agriculture now. Life assurance and life insurance policies account for less than 1% of all insurance policies in this country, which means that very few people actually have a life insurance policy or a life assurance policy. That is just bad, because it means that whenever you retire, you have to keep working. Those of you who are farming and agriculture, if you get a loan from a financial institution, yes, it comes with insurance, because it does naturally, because the bank is lending you money. But what about any other normal farmer that isn't borrowing, that's probably doing Fumvuza, even though there is now AFC, has a Fumvuza insurance policy? It's important. There's even insurance policy that can protect you against the amount of yields you make. Yeah, did you know that? If you used to make, I don't know, two tons a hectare, and now you only make one, there's an insurance policy that will pay you the gap between 1 and 2. Okay, so that was also an important thing. So there's a lot that can be done in insurance to obviously help create climate resilience and climate proofing. I think that is key. Now, Honorable Chidua, you can see your panel has extended. And why? Because we're going to go in your panel and then go to a Q&A straight away. We're not going to take a break. So I thought, let's keep all the presenters up here so they can do that. But Linda will give you the rundown, and I will let her go from here. Linda?
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. And as is already said, we've had those presentations. The first one was from Munyaradzi on food security implications of climate change in Zimbabwe, building a resilient and sustainable cereal production. The second was modeling trends of climate variability, impacts on sorghum production in semi-arid Mudzi district of Zimbabwe by Madame Wadzanai Mvundura. And then climate proofing agricultural production and growth by Mr. Mishek Ugaro, as well as the presentation we've had from the Ministry of Lands by the Chief Director, Mr. Clement Sabwenje. And I must just hasten to say, as you are saying, that there has been a shift in the way things are done. And as a media practitioner, I'll be quick to admit and buttress that even from us at Star FM, we've seen a different approach to doing things, government officials coming to radio and explaining most of these policies, the projects and the programs on what they mean to the ordinary people. So I must really commend the ministry and government for being forthcoming around messaging on issues that keep Zimbabweans awake at night. And then, of course, that last presentation by the director, Cuthbert Munjoma, the role of insurance regulation in enhancing climate risk resilience. And I will now leave time to the Pali chairperson on finance and budgeting, Honorable Clemens Chidua, to lead us through this panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Let me acknowledge our peers, the Honorable Minister, and right on the protocols that have been observed already. Yeah, we are really into some serious discussions here where we would want research to inform policy. We would want the policy-making process to be evidence-based. But just to make sure that my panelists are up to speed with what has been covered, we had a brilliant presentation from Munyaradzi. And Munyaradzi, he said he was going to avoid the presentation of the ARIMA models, the ARDL models. But I think what came out from the presentation by Munyaradzi is for us to come up with the climate change adaptation strategies and the evidence of the existence of climate change. And Wadzanai, again, there is convergence in terms of the agreement that there is climate variability. And then Michel Ugaro, again, there is convergence on the evidence of climate change and the need for us to come up with the climate proofing strategies. And then very critical, the presentation by Mr. Bwenje, the existence of backward and forward linkages, looking at the critical role of agriculture, where agriculture is feeding into the manufacturing sector. The need for us to understand that link that is there between GDP and agriculture. And then Mr. Munjoma, again, he said there is high reliance on rain-fed agriculture. And there is need again for us to ensure that we provide that coverage for the agricultural sector. So I've got a panel here, and I would want to give them that opportunity to respond to the presentations that have been done. I will start with you.
Are they working? Oh. Should I start? Thank you, Chairperson, and all protocols observed. And thank you so much for the presentations. I think we've had a brilliant presentation. And I'm honored to be here with my esteemed student. Now, Professor and distinguished panelists here, I think we do have a succession plan at University of Zimbabwe. I'm no longer there, she's teaching and she's here. And I want to say the same with all of our colleagues at the universities for the good work that they are doing, continuing with the tradition long established at our universities, combining meaningful research for policy with policymakers. Our universities here pioneered the FunPan. Some of you know it, where Lindy Westbanda has been leading that initiative, really to bring together the capacity of our universities and our ministries of agriculture in the SADC region to focus research on meaningful areas like this one. And I want to really, I'm impressed with the new generation of our economists who are continuing to do that. Now, to the specific presenters who have done a good job, I think it's a very good job that we've done. I'm just not going to focus on methodological issues. I'm going to focus on the key issues. Methodologically, let me just say one word. Remember, our data for MET is from 1900 to the present. Data for agricultural variables or productivity output started in 1961. So when I was there at the University of Zimbabwe, for example, we couldn't do a lot of time series work because remember, climate is 30 years. So in 1960 to 1990, literally couldn't have a 30-year lagged time series to really look into the effect of climate on agricultural output variables. It's only now, I think, with the almost 20 years of data, you can't do much in terms of serious analysis, but you can start to do something. So I just want you to know that is was a big problem that we had. The second problem that was there was the absence of downscaling of the climate data to MUDZI, for example. The technology was not there. I remember UCT used to do those downscaling models for us. But I think that technological barrier is now out. So we're going to be seeing quite a lot more transdisciplinary research work involving our researchers in the universities, at the Met Office, and in our ministries as well. Together, I think that's the approach that is needed, and I think that's the culture that our universities have done. Have implemented in the past. It's too bad we don't patent our research results. Otherwise, we'll be very rich by now. For some of the products that have gone to the region and they are still being utilized there in terms of our processes of doing policy research in a transdisciplinary way for agriculture. Just as a rider, we all know that our Ministry of Agriculture and government of Zimbabwe have done a lot in terms of advancing transformative agricultural investment, new innovations, to adapt our agriculture to climate change. So that's a given, and we want to congratulate our government for really spearheading that work together with our development partners. However, having said that, the reality is that when the 2023-2024 El Nino-induced drought was projected in June, as early as June, and we tried our best to adapt, some were calling for more adaptive measures, preparation for the outcome that was yet to come. We are critically and introspectively looking into how successful have we been. That's the question that we are posing. Are our adaptation measures, or what we are calling climate-proofing agriculture, been successful? Are they successful enough right now to be awarded it is to be acknowledged as successful at our international and regional forums? When we know this year, despite all the work, we were not ready. We're not ready in terms of our grain storage. We're not ready in terms of our reserve facilities for timely importation of additional maize, at least from government perspective. And I'm going to talk about how private sector fill that gap now. We're also not ready in terms of feeding, or at least having a social safety net that would cover the 7.88 million families that are going to, or people that are going to be hungry and we needed food. We had to appeal. But this time around, unlike any other time, and this is my point for policy engagement, our appeal, and our failures to engage at an appropriate forum in order for us to address this global policy failure. For the first time, perhaps in as many years, our appeal for international support to feed our people came flat. We were not able to raise enough money to take care of our hungry, forcing P.S. Gwamatanga and his team to really look inside a very strained fiscal resource budget in order for government of Zimbabwe to be present out there, I think from as early as May, June to the present, it will continue to be there. That's a huge fiscal budget, which, as you remember, and I do remember, that in the December budget in the Ministry of Finance, there was not really a special allocation in preparation for this, right? And why? Partly because, and I remember a celebration, we did ask this question, that why didn't we put some money aside to cope with drought when we knew in June of 2023 that it was coming? The answer that I think my colleagues in the Ministry of Finance said that, yeah, well, we're not expecting much of a loss because our agriculture is climate proofed. Therefore, it's going to be something that we can, within the realm of margin, that we could be able to address, right? So this is why this topic to me was timely, especially coming from Minister of Finance, to ask the question, how climate smart is our agriculture? How are we climate proofed? How successful is our measures? What else needs to be done? The research today, yeah, from this panel and other panels, have given some evidence that, well, maybe the magnitude of the challenge, we underestimated it. Therefore, the technological innovations and investment that we're doing and the scale at which we're doing them is not adequate. Chief Director Bwenji. That is not adequate. Maybe the budgetary support coming from ministries of finance in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi are not adequate. Maybe our ministries of finance do not have the physical resources and space in the Southern African region to actually be able to cope with financing themselves out of a climate change-induced drought of increasing frequency and increasing depth and periodicity. And this is really the reality. Now, given that magnitude of our globally induced climate change variation that we are experiencing, to what extent can we be prepared enough, climate-proofed enough, to be able to take care of that risk? I think that's a major challenge. From my experience and our own analysis, yeah, informed, by the way, by some of the work we have done with partners here, World Bank, I think, to acknowledge the work that we've done since 2020, and and also UNDP, ZRBF initiatives. So there are quite a number of initiatives that have been doing, and FAO and other partners. Just to mention a few. We are aware of how climate risk affects agriculture. We've been aware of that for a long time. We have not been aware, actually surprised at the reluctance of the international community to partner us in responding to that drought, to these climate-induced droughts. And that's one. So as Africans, normally what do we do when we have a problem and others are not coming on? We think that, yes, we can drill our boreholes to address water, City of Harare waters. Therefore, we should be able to drill ourselves out of a global induced El Nino drought, yeah, by asking our people to cope with the drought. Reality is that they cannot. And I think that's our first observation. So we cannot, in my opinion, let the international community space and just focus on the domestic space. Let's partner at the UNDP level with our partners in order to really move the climate financing agenda into a responsible, responsive, depoliticized facility for developing countries, including Zimbabwe. No strings attached, no bilateral policy mistakes or preconditions attached to that. We want a financing facility that UN will have control over, that when there is a drought in Southern Africa, they do have a starting point. The money readily available to give the $2 billion Southern Africa needs to respond timely to the drought. Going and with a begging bowl at the time when the house is burning, this year has shown us that is not right. Now, That is the policy innovation, Honorable Ichido, that I would want Parliament as well as our own government, Ministry of Agriculture, Industry and Commerce, Finance, as well as Environment, that in this international fora, as we negotiate at COP29 and subsequent COPs, that indeed we need a structured approach to addressing the risk of climate change facing our countries, because it's going to get worse. At the government level, now I'm moving from international space to what we can do as a government. And I want to acknowledge what Chief Director Bwenje has proposed. Perhaps we need to know now that there is more being asked by climate change adaptation or climate proofing agriculture in terms of investment requirement. A lot of our colleagues, including our student from economics, said irrigation could be the answer to climate change. The MAST transdisciplinary team has said that we need to look further into crop varieties and try to do more research there. That's the patient capital required for research. In order for us to have resources for adaptation financing of agriculture at home, perhaps Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Finance, and indeed government of Zimbabwe, under the whole of government approach, we really need to take seriously into how we can put money aside every year that will crowd in private sector financing and international development partner financing and be directed into the space of climate change adaptation financing. I think that's something that we need. It's not there. We need it now, and it will help us quite a lot. In terms of social protection at national level, I know our government is trying to do quite a lot. First, the acknowledgement that when a drought hits, it might be, first of all, a meteorological drought. It becomes a food security drought, but also an animal security drought as well. And therefore, the three-pronged approach that government is doing needs to be built upon and formalized. Social protection for humans, in my opinion, since every researcher here has realized that maize is more vulnerable. Small grains or traditional grains are more resilient. And to the extent that Ministry of Agriculture now, to really give them credit as government, to say they are now prioritizing under Fumbuza provision under Fumbuza of small grains or traditional grain seed packs into the dry areas. Now, so there's going to be a lot of grain coming to GMB from that. What is GMB going to do with it? The market, our appetite for small grain, SADA, is limited for an unknown reason. I think you called it colonization of our palates. I think that's a very good term for it. But having said that, what if social protection mechanisms are predicated on the delivery and provision of small grains only? So under government program, a social protection or food aid program will mop up all that grain that will be at GMB and be utilized for future support of our vulnerable people. Small grain food security strategy is healthy, it's good for you, and is something that promotes resilience, creates a market for the dry areas of Mudzi that were mentioned here today. I think it's something that we need to think seriously about. And accompanying that, of course, needs serious education of all our consumers, all Zimbabweans, on the health benefits of this process, so that it's not seen as a punishment. This is not new. I think the Americans know under the food stamp program, there were specific grains that are included there, not something else. So I just want to say these three policy areas are very pertinent and are very good. And I think in the interest of time, allow me to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me transition to the next panelist.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. I hope I'm not going to dilute what has already been said from my mentor sitting next to me here. But I almost kind of like agree with what Dr. Mano has just alluded to. We have already realized that early in the morning, the debate that we are not the main culprits, particularly in terms of causing the climate change. We are on the receiving end. So to what extent can we advocate from the international community, from the global funds, for funding for climate proofing ourselves? I think become one of the controversial issues. But when we drive also the message home, our government is also responsible in terms of coming in to see how we can cushion our key sectors so that our economy remains resilient. So that becomes part of the offering that we envisage to see from government as a commitment in realizing of this issue. And then also on the mechanisms for social protection, because we already know it's coming and we should be ready so that we safeguard our people. So I want to dwell a little bit more into the details of the presentations that you've alluded to, maybe starting with the last one. I think the last presentation emphasized the fact that we had already emphasized earlier in the morning that insurance markets in rural areas are very thin. 3%, it's a supply side issue and also a demand side issue. So this is an area where we are saying if private actors are finding it difficult to have space on account of the burdensome issues associated with dealing with the nature of farmers that we have, small and fragmented units that creates a lot of transactions costs. Can government continue to chip in supporting parastatal institutions that also do the same to safeguard our sensitive sector and fragile communities in the process? So we are saying let's have a collective public and private activity. Of course, I want to envisage that in commercially viable sectors like our A2, as Mr. Bwenje has presented, that these are supposed to go a step further to be more commercially viable. Yes, private markets can thrive there, but what about the A1, the communal, and other, who constitute the bulk of the farming sector? I want to be on the conservative side because when you are faced with a problem, and particularly if it's a problem where money is involved, my father used to say, if it's about money, don't talk to me about it. Because it's a problem at government level, it's a problem at international level. Let's take a conservative approach. Given the state of climate and what we have, the evidence that we know of how climate is going to be in what space of the country, what advantages can we take capitalizing on the existing natural resource base without even forking out any additional cent in terms of investment? Can we see the things that we can capitalize on the basis of the natural resources, our agroecological specialization? Sometimes you can do a win-win situation by just doing that, and then taking it further, if we see that we have resources, which we know where we are sourcing them, it's burdensome, even at international level and even at government level, it has got too many things. We then need to look at and say, how best can we allocate these resources across all the competing needs? I think there was a presentation that came in that showed us that from Mr. Ugaro, showing that the issues are complicated and there are so many things that needs to be done. An inventory of adaptation strategies that was given by Mr. Bwenje also shows that there are so many things that can be done. But I think the homework there, given an inventory of all those things, let's not just do everything. We know our farming sectors. We know the different types of people involved. Can we strategically plan in a short-term, medium-term to long-term to say what is suitable for who? What can we best put for what sector, rather than just having a blanket approach to everything? That can also help us. The first presenter, I think, alluded to potential irrigation that is not fully realized, 217,000 hectares, vis-a-vis a potential that is more than that. I wouldn't know the statistics off book. What is hindering the effective use of the existing and established irrigation infrastructure? Maybe we can also scrutinize that. Let's look at what we have done in the past. Let's see what is working and what is not working, and how best can we go forward so that we don't continue to put resources where results based on historical evidence are not coming through. Then I also want to talk about the relevance of gender to climate change debate, particularly when we look at food, when we look at water. Because when you talk of water, you can't exclude certain gender groups of society. We know that the increasing water scarcity is going to be too burdensome on women who are the custodian of all the domestic chores in the household, who unfortunately are also going to be the main actors in the agricultural sector. So in our strategies for climate-proofing agriculture, can we integrate gender seriously so that we ensure that we put in systems that help to safeguard and protect those whom we know have got a greater hand in terms of agricultural production and are also more affected by the resource water, which is becoming more scarce. Then I've talked about the need for long-term planning, access to finance for sensitive sectors like sorghum that we know are currently being produced at low levels. The uptake is very low. What form of finance is suitable for those sectors, if at all we want to promote sorghum as presented by the third presenter? We need to devise mechanisms for soft access to finance. Can Ministry of Finance avail productive sector facilities on a softer note that target smallholder farmers who are farming crops like sorghum so that we help them to take through? I think I've also noted the value of incentives. It has worked for maize in Zimbabwe. It's a popular crop because year in, year out, government comes in with subsidized support programs from production to marketing. So if at all we want also to change the mindset from being maize-centric to other crop-centric, can we also have those targeted subsidies? But we know sorghum is naturally a crop that thrives in dry areas. We have been told that 450 millimeters of rainfall is needed. Obviously, we cannot go and do that in Mashonaland Central where we know the rainfall is already too much for that. And then we are saying we are subsidizing again. We are not doing anything. That kind of subsidy need to be targeted, Natural Region 4 and Natural Region 5, where there is need for that, and we see how it works. And also starting from a piloting phase and scaling up gradually as we see that things are working, it's also going to be a strategic initiative. Marketing of not so common crops is a major disincentive to their production, particularly sorghum and the other small grains. We see that because farmers are very small, they produce little output. And the off-takers, on the other hand, they say that we need a minimum tonnage of this. So there is a serious aggregation problem there that is disincentivizing the farmers who are making an effort to produce, and sometimes they end up with a crop that is rotting in their silos because it has not been taken up in the market. What policy and institutional arrangement through our GMBs and so forth can we put in place to facilitate aggregation, standardization of production, so that the marketing of these commodities can also be easy? And also, as much as we are supporting irrigation development, good initiative in terms of climate change adaptation, but let's also be cognizant that the electricity challenge hit hard on that. Even if when we have harnessed the water, but sometimes if the electricity is erratic, it completely affects the whole system. So that this is where we can switch on to renewable energy sources, take advantage of climate change, the open suns that we have throughout the year, and be able to embrace solar energy rather than the electricity, the conventional electricity that we already know. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you so much. Let me just add a bit on the issue on irrigation development. And I think all of us, we have seen from the presenters that we are in agreement that climate change is with us. But from the presentation, I've also seen where some statistics has been presented on the correlation between harvest and rainfall. And this then gave us to the recommendation that there is need for us to expand irrigation infrastructure. But looking at what we have got Tokwemkos, Chifu Dam, Marobanyat, Muchekeranwa. All these are new dams. And if we focus on the dams that we have, where I'm coming from Masvingo, there is Manyuchi Dam, Mujwi Dam. All these dams, there is no irrigation infrastructure. And I think it is very critical for Ministry of Lands to be focused. Why am I saying they should be focused? The government is running program-based budgeting. And I know as a ministry for them, they may want to achieve everything. But given the budgetary constraints, I don't think it is feasible for Treasury to be able to meet every program that comes. And I think the issue of food security is supposed to be given a priority. And when you prioritize, it means in as much as you may want to do everything, but I think it is critical for us to focus our energies on irrigation infrastructure. And as we develop irrigation infrastructure, this is when now we need to do investment in the indigenous knowledge systems. We focus on those varieties that we think are good for us. So, Mr. Bwenje, I think this is something for you to say we have got quite a lot of programs, but given the budgetary constraints, that time is coming when you are supposed to submit your programs. And if you are to learn from last year, you remember your request was above the whole budget. And I think it comes down to prioritization. And I think it is very critical. From what is coming out here, there is need for us to be focused, making sure that we streamline on the programs that we think are very critical for the development agenda in line with the NDS1 and the priority areas is contained. So that's my submission. So we can move on to the next stage. I'm sure Andy, you are going to assist me on question and answer. Thank you.
Please, a big round of applause for the panelists. Now, I had kept the speakers up here to have a chat, and I know this young man was trying to run away earlier, but he couldn't. Now, you heard some of the comments relating to your presentation, irrigation, putting more money in infrastructure. Have a comment to what some of the speakers have said. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to the Minister of Finance and all the sponsors for arranging this conference. As a young researcher, I'm learning a lot from well-experienced researchers and the panelists. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So, come on, here's your opportunity. You're talking to the entire country, a room full of individuals. Talk to us about some of your recommendations. Come on. This is your paper. Own it. What did you recommend? What would you like government to do?
The main recommendation is the government should increase investment in infrastructure for irrigation. That's the main recommendation.
A big round of applause. A big round of applause. Now, we talked here about sorghum production, yes? You heard some comments there about why don't we maybe be bold, Reneth, and shift everything to sorghum. How about your comment?
Thank you very much, Andy. I learned a lot. Actually, the first thing that I learned was on gender. which is very, very important. We are actually neglecting gender in terms of climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. Something we should factor in when we are doing these policies. Then there is something that came up from the panelists, whereby they were actually talking about these semi-arid regions actually having excess of the sun. So can't we redirect the sun into solar energy so that we can generate electricity? Mudzi, you must bear in mind that it's one of the hottest regions in Zimbabwe. It's something that we can invest in, and actually we can actually make a catch with it. So I think that I'm learning a lot. I learned a lot also from the director of, Chief Director in Agriculture, talking about having the National Resilient Fund, which I felt that as a person who is so much concerned about sorghum, I think we'll have a talk with him on how we can actually go about it. Then on the issues of weather insurance, I felt that justice was done. We need weather insurance, considering that we're in climate change crisis. So thank you very much. I can spend the whole day talking, but, well, I think for now, I think I'll end here.
Brilliant, thank you. Give her a big round of applause. It's tough to come up here and talk. Right, what we'll do is we'll just have one just brief comment from the other panelists, and we'll open it up for Q&A. Right, Mishek, very quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think that what I would do from the discussions that have come up, conclude, is we need now perhaps to consolidate all this into perhaps one policy position paper that takes everything here, because it's very comprehensive. All the information is there. There are gaps, yes, in terms of disaggregating it to the actual, say, village, but the overall data is there. Also, finally, just to perhaps reword my statement on coordination across government. Maybe it's on implementation. Let me say implementation. For example, I like to use the Fumvudza one. I have evidence on my paper which shows that fertilizer utilization is going down, yet arable land is going up. So it means more people are farming, but they're not using fertilizer. But we know Fumvudza fertilizer is being issued out. So the question is it reaching all those inputs? Are they reaching the end? So there's need for coordination to ensure that the whole thing is audited. And perhaps this is what I was trying to bring forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Chief Director, you have a minute just to give us your comments before we open the floor.
Thank you so much for the comments. I think I really agree with what the comments that have been made. There was a comment to the effect that the issue on whether we have been climate-proofed enough. I think there was consensus from all the presentations. There's consensus that we are not climate-proofed enough, hence we are so vulnerable. And what we realized, when we talk of he was talking about the 219,000 hectares that are irrigable. You find that we realize that most of that area is under plantations. And when we come to summer, we have 70,000 hectares that is under irrigation. So we're saying we don't have enough under irrigation. And hence we have actually reviewed our targets to say, look, we need to develop 275,000 hectares so that we come to the 350,000 that you hear us talking about. But the challenge has been the capacity for funding. Where do we get the funding? Treasury is constrained. The Honorable Minister was talking about prioritization. Right. So I think our hope is in the private sector. That is my view. We need to see how we can bring in the private sector. There was talk of this catalytic fund, so that we leverage private sector funding into agriculture. But also, let's explore the route of incentives. I know Treasury would be interested in collecting revenue because it has got implications. But my view is, if we lose that revenue, it's actually an investment which will, bring in cash flows in terms of increased production, export generation. So we need to commit.
Chief Director, in conclusion.
If I was to bite a bullet, I would just have this very big irrigation development program for Zimbabwe. Under 2025 budget, Minister of Agriculture, here is the money, develop 200,000 hectares of land. And the next year, we are climate proof.
Oh, there's some agriculture's wish.
Thank you very much. I think I would want to reiterate the point raised that we now have sufficient data, especially time series data from a production and climate-related data. With artificial intelligence and developments in technology, I think we can leverage on that data so that we predict future trends such that as we even put in place our mitigation strategies, we are guided accordingly. I would also want to emphasize the need for collaborations. It's very important, public-private sector, government, all of us, we have a stake in this. Then insurance certainly is one option that we can consider, be it sovereign insurance or direct insurance to the farmers. In other markets, they've adopted an approach where a smallholder farmer may not benefit from any state-supported input scheme if he doesn't have insurance. In that way, a government, after supporting them with agro inputs, should there then be a drought or any other period that materialize, then at least there will be that layer of insurance going forward. So there's certainly scope to reconsider both the demand side and supply side of insurance. Otherwise, I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause to everybody up there. I think it's very clear we haven't drought-proofed enough. We haven't climate-proofed enough. We haven't dealt with the issues of climate change when it comes to ensuring that agriculture gets enough irrigation, gets enough infrastructure. Right now then, we do have a couple of minutes left. I have about 20 minutes left, so we can open it up to the floor. I think let's start with Prof, and then I know Busisa always says I never look left. Yeah, and so I'll look left now. Yeah, left.
Thank you, Master of Ceremonies. I think the point that I would like to make has really emerged from the presentations that have occurred this morning and even now. And this relates to the question of that we have not done enough for climate proofing. And so I'm listening to the Ministry of Agriculture. By the way, my presentation or my intervention is as an academic, not Ministry of Finance. Just to clarify that. So the impression I have, I just want to make 2 points. The Ministry of Agriculture and its plan is doing a lot towards diversification of agricultural production and livestock production. That's evident. But 2 factors that come up that need to be taken into account, which I don't think are being taken into account adequately. The first is that there has been a significant change in the consumption pattern of Zimbabweans. Maybe 15 years ago, it was 90% maize or 80% maize, and we required about, I'm not sure, but Dr. Manu and Mr. Buenje can correct me, we probably required about 1.4 or 1.5 million tons for human consumption of maize. Now, today that's not the case. I attended a meeting in the Ministry of Agriculture, and they put up a wonderful table which showed that the composition has changed completely. So if you look at the cereal consumption of Zimbabweans, there we have about 400,000 tons of wheat, which then translates into bread. Potatoes have become very important. And then rice, we don't grow it, but it's imported. So out of the 1.3 or 1.4 million tons of cereal that's required, I would say if you add up these 3, which is the wheat, the potatoes, and the rice, it probably is about half, or maybe even a little bit more than that. So what we are really looking at is a maize requirement which is significantly lower than what it used to be, say, 10, 15 years ago. Perhaps somewhere in the region of, 700, 800,000 tons or thereabouts. So that suggests one thing in terms of the policy or the approach of the Ministry of Agriculture and indeed the budgetary support of the Ministry of Finance, which is that it's not a good idea to have a primary focus on maize all over the country. as many people have said, many areas of the country over the next few years are going to become non-suitable for maize. And that's a foregone conclusion. I mean, apart from irrigation, of course. Irrigation will help to mitigate it to some extent. But what it means is that rather than trying to support maize all over the country, it should become much more specific to areas which are more suitable for maize production. And that requires a slightly different approach. So the idea is not to have maize-supported Fumudza all over the country, because if there's a drought, Fumudza is not going to help. Fumudza is not going to climate-proof those portions of the country. So I think that reconsideration has to be given to this question of cropping patterns to see what might be more appropriate between now and 2030. And some of the information given to us this morning by our meteorological friends about agro-meteorological maps. In other words, superimposing agriculture production patterns on the drought and the flood maps and the climate change variability maps that they showed us might help us to look at focusing a little bit more closely on maize production in areas where there is a comparative advantage. I think, in fact, Renat Mano once did some work on this, and you said that out of 60 districts, maybe about 20 or 25 are most suitable for that. And the other areas should really start looking at how to encourage farmers to move into other crops, like sorghum, for instance, cassava, and indeed wheat, of course, is there, and other crops. So these are the two factors I just wanted to mention that mitigate against having a maize-centric approach in agricultural policy and moving rather to a more diversified structure of agricultural production, which would contribute to climate proofing. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Prof. Okay, we'll write down the questions down and then the comments. We'll see the views. Please, everyone who answers a question, please could you introduce yourselves, your name. Linda? Yeah, please. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you for all the presentations. I agree with Prof. Chakravarti there. I think for the 800,000 tons of maize that is left, I think we need a plan on the small grains part to further decolonize, to use a strong word, that always gets people's attention, to decolonize our palates from maize. But I think there's two aspects to that. One is education, the adverse aspects of eating sadza, 3 times a day. We need to foreground that and highlight that. There's a bit of a mind shifting that needs to happen. And I think our educational institutions can play a big role in that. Not enough has been said. I mean, when we grew up, there was adverts about milk, having eggs, and so on and so on. It was commercially driven. So I think we can do the same in terms of advertising and getting the message out there. Then secondly, I think there is a nexus between primary production and industry. The reason why maize is growing so much is because you've got big players in there. You've got Tiger Brands, you've got now small-scale millers that will take up all the maize that a farmer grows. Farmers will not grow something which is difficult to find a market in. So until we establish that value chain, very clearly and say big players, and being somebody from private sector, I'm talking to myself. I'm a buyer. In other words, we're going to do something about that, and we're entering that sector. But I think there needs to be more bigger players in there, industrializing, taking sorghum and this millet. I grew up in the rural areas. There was Mapfunde, there was always Mapfunde, there was Munga, Unyauti, Amabele, there was Rapoko, So those small grains, really just to spend a bit of time mapping that from an industry point of view, I think it will go a long way. Once farmers know, in a district, in a province, I can go to this company and sell and be paid fairly for my produce, I think you'll start to see, a response. And then the third point to support this is obviously incentives. Incentives along the value chain. For the primary producers, as Prof. Chakravarti has said, mapping, once you've correctly mapped the areas, but also for industry as well. Some incentive, double taxation, accelerated, deductions on tax. It's a new industry that we want to promote. And so it would be very useful in the next budget to see some incentive along this direction or this slant that we want to take in incentivizing through policy. As somebody says, policy drives productivity. I know, Andy, you're giving me the eye. My last one is is a generic one on irrigation infrastructure. I don't agree that we should look to Ministry of Finance because we all know the reality. I mean, I think it's counterproductive to keep looking to coffers that we all know are very constrained. I think we need to be more creative. We need to package our irrigation, the dams that somebody spoke about. We need viable, and my colleagues from ZEDA are here. One of our challenges is viable, bankable projects or information memoranda. Even before feasibility, just the concept of what's the commercial slant around Kunzvi Dam, around Tugwe Mukosi. I mean, you may know it in agriculture, but certainly other agencies that can assist. We then package these. Go to Botswana, go to Dubai, go to places, and this becomes something we are selling as an opportunity and be open-minded to share. I know some investors from India, for example, wanted a 50-50 sharing where you irrigate 1,000 hectares and you share the output by exporting some to India and some for local. So I think we need to be really creative about creating partnerships, alliances around irrigation projects, around this whole drive to irrigate and climate-proof. I submit. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Busisa. Right, let's take, okay, don't worry, guys. We're going to finish all your questions. Don't be concerned. Right, can we stick to, we'll come to you, Sam. Name, title, please, organization, and straight to the point, because we have to answer them. Ma'am, please, if you stand up, we can't. Thank you. Here we go. Linda, can you please take that there? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ethel Bangwayo from UNDP, and thanks to all the presenters for such interesting presentations, and allow me to write on the protocol already observed. I'd like to start with the last slide from the Insurance Council on issues of ESG and sustainability, which are becoming very, not only topical, but also very important in terms of a lot of the issues we're discussing here today. Much of what we're seeing with climate change is outside of our control, but there are many human factors that contribute to water scarcity. For instance, climate change itself, in terms of how we live our lives and how we run our businesses and institutions sustainably, responsible business, for instance. However, a lot of that we deem irresponsible, maybe in terms of sustainability, is economic activity, is development activity that is feeding into the same Vision 2020, the same SDGs. And so coming out of this conference are going to be recommendations for policy actions as well, but it'll be important to take a 360-degree view, looking at policies as well that have a bearing on what we're talking about and vice versa. So for instance, if we are plugging the housing deficit, it shouldn't be by allowing people to build on wetlands, for instance. And it will be important to do that mapping and to take a look. With NDS 2 coming up soon, the development of it is coming up soon. It will be important as well to build in sustainability, to build in SDGs, to build in these sort of issues. Under the development of NDS 1, UNDP worked with partners and all line ministries to align the NDS to the SDGs. And with the NDS 2 coming up, we've got an opportunity to do that, but do it even more so we can safeguard development. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. I'm going to throw it to you, but very quick answers, please, Dr. Mano. Very quick answers. So let's talk about the first issue from Professor Chakravarti. I think the basic issue was look at cropping patterns. It was said earlier, look at cropping patterns. We intervene in those cropping areas for the right crop, for the right time that suits the environment. Who would like to take that? Dr. Mano, you'd like to take that? I think the microphone's on. You should just be able to talk with a bit of luck. Are they not on? Try that one. Give it to me then. Give it to me. Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for the question. Yes, of course. I think one of the issues for our change in crop mixes by agroecological origin, I think all the information that we have digested today, and I'm sure Minister of Agriculture takes notes, is pointing to the fact that our agroecological origins are changing. And that's a task for Agritechs now to come up with the appropriate crops for the different regions. By crops as well as livestock, but there's certain areas that are no longer even suitable for anything. Not even under Fumbuza. I think that is very clear coming from the new agroecological maps that are coming out from our MET and from our scientists. So I think I concur with that. Your second observation, that indeed our diets are changing and therefore the crop mixes are changing. There is a misconception, however, Professor, that as our diets are changing, therefore we need to de-emphasize maize. The diets are changing, the mix of grains and proteins is also changing. We are realizing in agriculture markets today that our commercial maize is normally now about 850,000 metric tons commercial maize demand. And out of that, it used to be 600,000 metric tons going for roller mill and ufu, and the rest going to stock feeds. Now it's reversed. It's now 450 and 400. It's probably going further, and that's global. That's what happens when you go to upper middle income countries. It will be like that. The third issue related to what you suggested, or to your comment, was to do with market. I think the most important aspect is cross-cutting on adaptation, something that we should all take care of, and I think this is very important for Minister of Agriculture and for Minister of Finance. Adaptation is about making our markets work. If we don't make our markets work to deliver appropriate incentive to private sector to buy, consumers to buy, and farmers to sell, if we mess price incentives with controls, then we have a problem. If we allow import parity prices for products that are already produced here, where food security pricing means lower prices than import prices, then the small grains that are produced in Mudzi will not end up in Chitungwis. So, and lastly, dietary diversity is not new. I think we have always been eating the 5 major grains plus potatoes in Zimbabwe. I think what is becoming very clear is the ratios are changing, and I think the Minister of Agriculture, if I'm not mistaken, Crop and Livestock report did portray the new dipstick to say that I think our requirements now per capita is now 75. We expect that to go down. You know, in South Africa, it's now 65. So we are heading that way, and we are monitoring that. I think for World Bank, we are begging that PICES research be undertaken as soon as possible. I think it's this year, so that we have clear evidence-based information about your food basket. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I told you, please, guys, we need to move. We've only got 15 minutes. I don't want Jimmy, I'll come there. We've only got 15 minutes, and I stick to my time. I want to get you quickly. We talked here about the Busisa Moyo talked about boosting small grains education mindsets, also incentives. I think that's more for finance, but more irrigation infrastructure. Don't go to finance, be creative about restructuring that. So you have literally 30 seconds to answer those comments, sir.
Well, I agree with what Mr. Busamo has been saying. Basically, I believe in the incentive. We really need to incentivize industry to come to the party and also complement government. But I wanted to put my comment in perspective when we say we have not done enough. I think so that I am not misquoted. This is with respect to irrigation, right? Like I was indicating there, we have 75,000 available for some. That is irrigation. So I think that's too little. And this is why we are turning to the west-based, because that's where we have more area.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that clarification. Right then, education, be creative. I think that's taken on board. I think it's very clear that finance doesn't have the money. UNDP, sustainability. Let's take a 360% view, because we know that we have to economically grow outside of agriculture, but we're also growing in agriculture. So we need to make sure that we put policies, mainstream economic, mainstream environmental and climate policies while we are developing in all areas. Right, let's start. We have to rush through, guys. We've only got a few more minutes. Ma'am, let's go. Is it working? Yep. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll move over that side. Let's go. Thank you. Yeah, just talk, ma'am. Just talk. Yeah, just
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've introduced myself before, so I will not do that. Just two quick points. One is the issue. I want to buttress the issue that was raised about gender and climate change. I think it would be folly if I don't speak about gender and climate change, because we just concluded the National Gender Forum in Rwanda 2 days ago, and the theme for this year was gender, environment, and climate change. Perfect. And it was very clear. We had 10 provincial workshops, and it was very clear from all the provinces that the issue of gender and climate change, the issue of mainstreaming the gender into climate change is very critical, because women are disproportionately affected by climate change because of their social roles. So I think we need to mainstream, and I think we've done that by developing a national gender action plan, and we also integrated gender into our NDCs, so which is critical. I just wanted also to comment quickly on the issue of someone raised the issue of climate change, the international funding for climate change at the UNFCCC level. I want to mention that there's actually an adaptation fund. There's also a loss and damage fund that was just adopted recently. And I think it is up to us to develop bankable projects so that we can also harness those funding in terms of our programs as well. Just a quick question to Minister of Agriculture. I think a few years ago there was an introduction of cassava, to grow cassava, and people were given packages to grow cassava, and it just died a natural death. I just wanted to find out what happened. Thank you.
Brilliant. Cassava, thank you. Right, thank you. As I said, please, you have to be very quick.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Kolisani Moyo from the city of Bulawayo. My first reaction is on the promotion of these small grains. I think we need to be honest to each other. If you look at the population, we have got 2,000, what we call the K2 generation. I'm a 2K. No one eats SATA. Those people, they have moved from SATA, whatever in terms of advertising that you can do, they will not eat SATA. Apart from that, if you look at even in Africa or in the world over, if we want to be an upper middle income economy, no economy that is eating SATA as their staple food is a developed country. SATA on its own, I'm telling you the truth, SATA is for the poor, even in communities where we come from. We know that this community, they eat SATA. Instead of concentrating on the poor, food for the poor, let's also promote things like potatoes. Number two, the research that have been presented here, I have a problem with all of the research papers. They are concentrating on the porridge and the SATA, but the relish part, they are not saying anything about relish.
Okay.
Where I come from, we do livestock, and I believe livestock is also food, because we will end up find ourselves with porridge without relish if we concentrate on these small grains and we are not talking about livestock and how climate change has affected livestock. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I love Santa, so I must be very, very poor. I must be very poor. Right, lady, madam, and then to Sam, and then I'll move over there. Right, please stand up, say you are, but you have to make it quick, otherwise I'm going to cut you off. Please, order, please, order. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. My name is...
No, can we go over, sorry, can we go over that side, please, first? You will go there. You've had a couple. Let's go that side, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Erin Achipuma. I'm a senior research fellow with the Zimbabwe Economic Policy Analysis and Research Institute, ZEPAD in short. We had a study on small grains sometime, and one of our recommendations was that there is generally a decrease in yields for small grains because of the recycling of the seed that they use. So possibly there's need to ensure that even the smallholder farmers, they also have access to certified seeds on a large scale so that at least we have also different varieties of the small grains. The other thing, because I grew up in the rural areas and my father was a very serious farmer, you know, with small grains, it's very labor intensive. The weeding process, the harvesting, the threshing, okpura, you know, it's something else, you know. So my father, what he used to do was he could call what we call nimbe or humwe. So the community members would come and assist us. Like in my case, I never participated in the weeding because the process itself, normally the elderly would do that. Okay. So do we have the labor in the rural areas to do that?
Right.
Thank you.
Let's end it there. Right, Sam, can we just pass it here, please, very quickly? Yep. Very quickly then. Okay, can we move that over to that side? Don't worry, we'll come to you. No. We're coming to you. You've had two interchanges. Wait, Jimmy. Sam, let Sam come, then you can come, Jimmy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Sam Matsekete. I'm from Old Mutual. So the point I probably would request a comment from the panel or from somebody about is where we place in all these interventions the people piece. And by the people piece, I mean the mindsets, the behaviors. You know, we can do a lot of infrastructure development. We can do a lot of interventions and programs, put a lot of money in there. But as long as the practices are not driven to valuing to protect water bodies, to protect the arable land, to ensure that the water catchment bodies are protected, and to be prepared in the ways that they shape priorities to adapt or adopt resilient practices, we will still be in the same place. So climate change will happen, but its impact, I believe, and the severity of it will depend on what do people do and what sort of behaviors and how are we in policy making and in other interventions really driving the practices, the mindsets to saying we are preparing to be resilient in our own practices, in our immediate environments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Right, Jimmy, thank you.
I'm Jimmy Silos. I chair the Economic Committee at CZI. I just want to second what Honorable Chidua said about prioritization. If you look at the Pareto law and the power of the 20% that produces 80% of the output, if we focus our efforts there, I think we can really rapidly drought-proof ourselves. So if you look at agricultural region 2A, which is the main maize-growing region, I think there's about 3 million hectares there. If you talk about 800,000 tons being commercial, and then you need to double it to cover the whole country, that's 1.6 million tons. At 10 tons per hectare of irrigated land, you're talking about 160,000 hectares, which is literally 4% of the land. So focusing on the high priority, I think we can rapidly achieve the drought proofing we require. Thanks.
Thank you, Jimmy. Right, I saw there was someone else be there, madam, and then don't worry, I'm coming to you. Someone here, please. Thank you. Right, we're getting the final round before I throw it back to the panel to close up, and then we'll close up, me and Linda. Thank you. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to comment on PIXA, which has been mentioned by Wazanai. For your own information, PIXA is already running in Zimbabwe. We have got 16, 17 districts that are actually implementing PIXA right now. The agriculture extension officers have been trained from the national office, but we now have the extension officers in the wards for the districts trained, and they are currently now training the farmers. So that's ongoing.
Okay.
And then on climate services, again, that is also ongoing in those districts. And what is happening is focus are produced at the national level. They go to the provincial meat officers. The provincial meat officers then have a group with the district heads in agriculture. They explain the focus, and the district heads have to communicate with the extension officers. Then they translate the focus in the local language of the wards.
Right.
They develop advisories, and then back to the national offices on the template. And by 4 p.m. of Tuesday and Friday, that focus is reaching the farmers in the districts where the project is
So things are happening
running.
on the ground. All right, can you want to wind up there?
Yeah, then the last one is, my request is, we have seen results from the presentations. It would be good to have a repository of national data that is used, which we know that is standard, because we don't know how many stations were being used for the national averages that were being presented here. So I think it's good if, as a nation, we adopt one data set that we can use. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, I'm going to go to the prof, but wait, let me end the prof, because I don't want to get a lecture. Prof, you're not going to lecture us,
Yes,
are you?
thank you.
Okay, here we go. Very quick, please.
Professor Albert Makochikana, University of Zimbabwe Business School. Mine is directed to IPEC. The 3% or less than 3% of insurance being done to small-scale farming. But I thought it's also good to come back to the facts that whether I use Zimstat or what, the poverty datum line as an economist. If I cannot afford a bread, then insuring my crop is secondary. Even if I were to do a sample here, most of us are farmers, we have plots. How many of us have insured? Of course, so unless you are a politician with some free money somewhere. But how many of us have insured? Some of us, we have parents who are in the rural areas. Have you insured their crop for your father or mother?
Right.
So the reality is people cannot afford, especially those in rural areas, to insure their crop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, final comment, please. And then this one, I give you literally 20 seconds to ask your questions.
Thank you very much, Godwin Mrewa. I'll speak on the footsteps that from NECF that have been said by Professor Kochekanwa. Actually, I wanted to speak on the agri-insurance. The 3% is too low, and there's an assertion that we are insuring our vehicles more than agriculture. And maybe if you had to look at the metrics, that insurance in vehicles, it could be mainly on third-party insurance, because you know that if you are to be involved in an accident by someone, then there's going to be a claim on you. But if it's just your crop, then you say, yes, you just accept that I've made a loss. So my plea to IPEC is if they can maybe come up with some program that will make sure that we have some insurance packages that are affordable and attractive to our farmers, given the vagaries of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'm 1 minute over, so I'm going to give myself an extra 5 minutes, and that is not good for me, and that is off my KPIs. I hate it. But we're going to quickly go through. Cassava, what happened to it? Where's the microphone? You'll have to find out. All right. IPEC, any products or anything to look at? Insurance always is the last thing. When the economic bad times, insurance goes, and we focus on food and other things. Quick comment. Where's the microphone, please? Thanks, Linda. Can you give it quickly? Let's go, guys. Thank you. Guys, microphone, please. Right, come on. Yep, go for it there. Try.
Points noted on affordability. That's why I emphasize the need to assess both the demand side and supply side. On the supply side is IPEC. It's one area where we are trying to influence through microinsurance. We have licensed a number of microinsurers. The products generally are affordable, small premiums, $10, $15, and among the pilots, I think those are some of the premiums that are being paid. There is scope for a government subsidy. I emphasized in my presentation to say, in addition to possibly giving out free inputs, then you also, at the end of the day, after a drought, you'll be responsible as government for the payment, for the food handouts. A subsidy can actually be of help. Then development partners can also have a role in that regard.
So there's more to do on that side, and IPEC is involved there as a regulator, and I'm sure, as you said, Sam is here from Old Mutual. That'll be a discussion. Sam, we are the people in this. We look at protecting our land, our bodies of water, catchment areas, etc., resilience, and in fact, we need to also inculcate citizens to be conscious of climate change and the environment so that they can also play a part in mitigating it. And so I suppose that was one of the questions, of course, which I'm sure we can answer. Jimmy, prioritize support. I think it's been a theme that's gone through. Let's prioritize where we can put our money to make the most effectiveness. I think Dr. Mutambara talked about spending so much money, but it was ineffective last year when we could have put it into other areas which have been more effective. Something to think about as a policy perspective. Repository of national data, I think that's something everyone talked about. Let's have a central database. Let's all talk to each other so the information is used effectively. Right, I think, let's not forget small grains, relish, and salsa. Thank you. And we will definitely look at some of those. I think some of the research papers were picked specifically to look at some of the core, but I don't think anyone will forget relish and some of the other products you spoke about from your area, sir. And of course, livestock, cattle is very much a part of environmental and climate mitigations. Right, Honorable Chidua, I'm going to hand over to you to have a final word, 1 minute final word, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe to emphasize the point that came out here on investing in early warning systems. I think it is also important for us going forward that in order to continue to understand the variability of climate change, there is need for us to invest in early warning systems. And then probably the last one is allowing the full operationalization of ZIMEX with regards to commodities, price discovery. At the moment, I'm sure we're having cases where ministry will come in with the indicative minimum prices. But I think let's just allow the market to operate. These are commodities, and the market will find its own true value.
And of course, the farmers will get the true value for their product.
So sometimes you determine the price that is even too high than the market expectation. And the people, they will be selling below the government price, as long as it is the market price. So I think going forward, let's allow the full operationalization of ZIMEX and invest in early warning systems.
Right, thank you. On that note, we'd like to call this session to a close. So let's thank them. As you leave the stage, we thank them. We've got the chair, Honorable Chidua. You may go, sir. We've also got Munyarazi Chizomba from the University of Zimbabwe, Ms. Wadzanai Mvundura, Marandora State University. Of course, we have Misha Bugaro, Clemens Bwenje, Cuthbert Munjoma, and of course, Renat Namo and Jacqueline Mutambara. Please, a final big round of applause. Remember my protocol. They've done so well. Well, Linda, we've come to the end of what I believe is an excellent first day at Zedcon 2024. Of course, under the theme, Building Resilience and Driving Economic Transformation Under Climate Change. Now, before we just say goodbye to you, for today, of course, let's talk about a few things. One, please will you register at the front desk? You please must register. If you haven't registered, please do so immediately. This evening, there will be a cocktail party at 7 p.m. by the pool. Or maybe not. Well, anyway, we'll find out about that. Sponsors, yeah. Sorry, no cocktail party. It's been cancelled. Sorry, no, I'm joking. Sponsors, I'd like to thank our sponsors, of course, the UNDP. We've also got NASA. We've got Potras, Cicadia, and of course, our NCC, and of course, our host, Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion. So please register as much as you can. Now then, Linda, is there anything you were told to say?
I think the request that has come through is that for tomorrow, which is the official opening of Zedcon 2024 by His Excellency, the President, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, the request is that organizations that have a number of delegates, please assign only the senior officials from your organizations to avoid congestion tomorrow. Thank you.
Now, don't forget, there will be high security as usual, because, of course, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe will be here. We'll be kicking off at 8:30 a.m. That's when it starts. The official program starts, which means you need to be here at least 1 hour before. I stress that, please, because you know what may happen in terms of security. Well, I think that's it for tonight. The cocktail party is on today, 7 p.m. at the pool deck, so we'll meet you there. And I think for me and Linda, thank you. Great day. And please, tonight, all of you be safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.